I've just got everything set up for today's live stream, and it's going to be a little bit different today because I'm probably not going to be doing any spinning, but it's really important to keep your tools in good working order, and so that is basically what we're going to cover today. I think a lot of what I will cover is going to be relevant for any spinning wheel, so it's not just Kromski. It will be more specific to Kromski today, but a lot of this stuff will apply for other wheels as well. So feel free to ask questions as we move along, and also talk a little bit about my tools. I've got over here my setup for answering questions. So if you have questions or if you need me to like adjust the angle or wipe off my camera. I do this every single time. Within the first couple minutes of every live stream, I have to wipe off my video. All right. So, okie dokie. Good morning. Good morning, Chris. I'm pretty sure it's morning for everybody in the States right now. So I've got a Kromski Minstrel, and that's the wheel that I'm going to be using for this particular live stream. I also have some tools, so because the footmen are a Phillips screwdriver, I need a little mini one like this so that I can take those off. I also have a couple of different rags. So I'm probably going to be using this one for the polishing, and I'm probably going to be using this one in part for the wiping. So there's a lot of dusty areas that I'll need to take care of. I also have a few things to help facilitate the cleaning. So there's some grimy bits on here, and I think that is just probably a combination of lanolin and maybe beverages. I know I'm not alone when I say things like, you might be drinking while you're spinning. So to take care of those sort of stuck on dirt areas, I've got a bowl here of warm soapy water, and I have an old toothbrush. It's important to not use anything really abrasive, and the part of the reason why I'm going to be using a toothbrush is I want to be able to get into little tiny areas to clean everything off, but I also want to make sure that I don't douse my entire wheel with water because it is wood, it will absorb it, and so I want to be able to work a small area at a time and then wipe it up immediately with this. And then I have, yeah, I know, right? No one ever gets drunk while spinning. Okay, I've only gotten drunk a couple of times while spinning, but I do occasionally have like a glass of wine that's after dinner. And then I have this desire to digest and drink and spin at the same time. Usually we're watching something. So it's usually only for about, I don't know, 45 minutes to an hour. Yeah, so in terms of how I'm going to do the finishing, I'm going to use this, it's a big tub of sweet almond oil. The reflection from my light, it's a pretty typical Leicester day today, so it's just gray and abysmal. And the light above me is very yellow, and it casts the wrong type of shadow, so it's a top-down shadow. So unfortunately, because of my setup, the light is a bit bright and I can't dim it at all, so apologies if you can't see the label. But basically, it's just a big container of sweet almond oil. It's the same thing that I use for all of my leather stuff. So these are my favorite shoes. I've got this in 3 different colors. I've got the red ones and the brown ones and the black ones. And so I use this to condition the leather. It's also very, very cheap. And then in terms of waterproofing, I have a, oh, it's a little bit dusty now. It's called Bees Grease, and I bought this several years ago, I asked the person who created it, because it was a handmade product, naturecraft.net, if they're still available, then maybe you can get some there. But this is a beeswax polisher that will help seal things in, and it does kind of smell like barbecue. I don't know everything that's in it, but it was pretty much all plant derivative, except for the beeswax, of course, which come from bees. So that's basically what we're working with here. And like I said, Kromski wheel, but this will be relevant to most other wheels, especially those that are wooden. This might be a little bit time consuming. I don't know if I'll actually be able to do it during the entire stream, but I will do as much of it as I can. Because there's a lot of little nooks and crannies on these wheels. But I do have a video on my YouTube channel where I talk about putting a Kromski together, and I think there's also the corresponding one where I take it all apart for storage. Yeah, this is me just trying to maintain the wheel. It's been 2 years, and normally I like to do this about once a year, kind of like a spring cleaning idea. Hi Cheryl, sunny Saskatchewan, sounds lovely. So what I'm going to do is just kind of take away the parts that are really easy to dismantle. Because I actually keep these in relatively good condition, they're probably not going to be super bad. But this is also a really good opportunity to get rid of like these little extra bits that sometimes accumulate on your bobbins. So this is just where I have tied on bits of yarn so that I can ply. I'll probably have to use the scissors, and I did not bring the scissors in here. Might be good to have scissors on hand when you do this. So I've taken that part, the bobbin off, and now I've got my Lazy Kate here. I need to take that off, and there's a wing nut at the bottom. And the same thing applies for this type of tool as well. So you can see here, maybe, there's a lot of dust that's accumulated right there and there. So this should all come apart. Hopefully I don't make too many weird faces during this. I tend to, it's difficult for me to hide emotion on my face, especially when there's gross things. So there's like this screw here, and it's got the most like ridiculous layer of grime and dust on there. If you are satisfied by watching things that are dirty get clean, then this is probably going to be very satisfying for you to watch. So I've just used some soapy water to clean that off. And since this is really not grimy, I'm just going to see how much I can wipe off. And that should be sufficient. There's a little bit of grimy stuff down at the bottom, because when you put the bobbins down, there's a little bit of oil sometimes on the inside where you've put it on your flyer, right? From there, you put oil there just to keep the friction level low. So when you set them on here, they will sometimes drain oil, and so that will get a little bit grimy. I'm just going to give that a quick little wipe just to remove that, then wipe it down really, really well. So I'm pretty sure that I'm going to be the only one doing a full-on clean of her wheel, but if you are also doing this alongside, let me know what wheel you're working with. And if you are doing something much more fun, like a craft project, let us know what that is. Okay, one of the things I'm going to try to do is keep my drive band because it's still in good condition, and one of the things that I hate is having to replace it unnecessarily. So I'm probably going to try and keep as much of this base here as possible together. But I know I'm probably going to need to deal with the drive wheel here. So part of this is just going to be a matter of taking things apart in a way so that I can get everything clean, but not necessarily for storage. So the back side of the wheel is actually where the amount of dirt and grime is the worst. So maybe I'll just move the camera forward a little bit. Maybe show you here. You see this? It's a kind of like caked on bits of grease, probably from whenever I oil this, it might be falling off and accumulating here, so it's a little bit grimy. So that is going to require a bit more energy to clean appropriately, but I think because it goes underneath the drive wheel, I'm going to have to take that part off. So in paint place, they're actually really fuzzy too. Going to give these a quick wash, again with this warm soapy water. Like so, and wipe everything off. Are you cleaning your wheel too, Chris, or is yours still clean from your last maintenance session? Oh, that one's really gross. So does that mean you're watching me slave away, keeping mine clean, and you're doing some more interesting project? So I also wanted to take this opportunity to sort of talk a little bit about some recent prospects. Yeah, I think considering that it's been about 2 years for me actually doing a proper dismantle, clean, and oiling and resealing, it's really not that bad. It could have been way worse. So yeah, these pins that hold the drive wheel in place can sometimes get a little bit beat up. So I can get this camera to focus on the pin instead of my face. You might see there's some like indentations, like right there. That's from holding these brass, it basically allows the crank to turn freely on the inside. So it holds that in place so that the drive wheel doesn't kind of bumble around as I'm spinning. So because of that, these can get a little bit brass. Now comes the really pain in the rear part, removing the footmen. But I still want to keep them attached to the treadles. So yeah, because they are attached to the drive wheel, I can't actually take the drive wheel off until I unscrew these. So as I was saying, I've been experiencing some delays on my end because I've been given a couple of interesting propositions for job opportunities, all crafting related, so that's actually really exciting. I can't disclose anything yet because it's all extremely preliminary, but I'm hoping this will actually help a lot of the current issues I've been experiencing with finding work. some of you have been very, very generous and just offered donations to help me keep going, which I've really appreciated. And those donations have actually gone into reducing my anxiety about what I can sell in my house to help get extra cash, or putting my services out there to mend clothing for other people for cash, because it really takes a lot of time from me to do that rather than other things. But at the end of the day, if you don't have enough money to eat, it causes a lot of stress. So because the cost of everything is going up, and even if you're really, really frugal and you do a lot of cooking from scratch like I prefer to do, the cost of living is just higher. So yeah, just those people who have helped, it's been a major impact for me. But I'm hoping with these recent prospects, it's actually 3 different prospects that have cropped up all at the same time this week. This week alone, I've had 3 different prospects. And it's a lot to handle at first. I think I will be able to kind of pull myself out of this particular situation, but it will be difficult at first. But because I've been so focused on those other situations that I've not really been able to properly do any content. So I set up to do the Fiber Talk video on Friday morning before I had to head off to my other job, and I couldn't get it done in time. So I unfortunately got everything set up and then had to pack everything up again. It's really annoying, but I'm hoping that those situations won't be occurring next week. I'm very hopeful, but I will have some meetings to discuss my particular future with Expertly Dyed and other things that might sort of coincide with what I'm already doing. I don't know. There we go. I've got it out. And these are really, really dirty. You can see. I'm just going to drop those in the water. Well, this one I actually can't because it's attached. But now that the wheel is free, what I'm going to do is just kind of wipe off the bits in between with this rag. Like that. This part, because it goes around, it doesn't accumulate dust in quite the same way. And when you've stopped spinning and it sits, it doesn't accumulate always in the exact same spot. So I find this part doesn't actually get quite as gross. Also because I'm usually looking at the front part of the wheel while I'm both using it and storing it, I don't often notice what is accumulating behind. So when I was doing last week's live stream, I saw that and I was like, should probably actually clean this because I don't want its beauty because I've just ignored the whole cleaning. So yeah, I just thought it was high time to do something about this. So as I said, this part of the wheel isn't so bad, but it's really this area here where there's some oil accumulation. Any kind of dust or flyaways get stuck to it. So this part is the best way to it's the best way to indicate that you might need to do some more cleaning. Because if it's sort of like the oil that you put here and it spreads around, then it's probably a much bigger mess. And if you stay on top of things, it will be less of a mess. Less, what's the word? You don't have to use as much shoulder or elbow grease to clean it. And then in the end, it won't take that long to dismantle, clean it, put it back together. So if you've got a big mess, it will be a big job. The best way, if you want to donate, just to keep this education content that I produce for YouTube, and I will be getting back to the blog. It's just been, I have a lot of ideas, but no time to sit down to actually write them. But there's a lot of things I want to comment on, particularly relating to the recent Etsy strike. Kind of formulating my thoughts a bit more with that. But on my actuallydied.com website, the landing page that you go to, there's a link for donating on there. But I also really like being paid for the work that I do. And I would, if you're interested, I would much rather you buy some yarn or some wool, and because I've priced everything to be in a sustainable fashion, then I'd be much happier if you went home with something beautiful and I got paid for my work. The world is full of beautiful stuff, but it could also be full of more beautiful things, and I don't want to be the only one enjoying it. I want to share that with others. So if you would rather donate, that's perfectly fine. But I like to work for my keep. I really don't have any issues with just anyone who wants to buy something in order to donate those funds to me. That's okay. So the other thing I didn't mention that is an important tool is a fingernail. But make sure that when you use it, you push away from your body. So there was a bit of a stubborn grime here, and I pushed away from my body. So it's important not to push towards your thumb, because you actually might get something stuck up underneath your nail bed, and it can cause infection. But your nail is not likely to scratch the finish of your wheel, so a valid tool that you could use. Yeah, it's really difficult knowing where your next dollar is coming from. That's very true, Cheryl. It's frankly not going to get much easier. So especially here in the UK, cost of living has recently gone up, and the war in Ukraine is going to exacerbate a lot of this. Like, food shortages are going to be real. Now, because I don't really do much in the way of processed food, it may not affect me as much as it might other people. But I suspect it might, just because a lot of grains come from Ukraine, and anyone who eats a highly processed diet, which also includes vegans, if you want anything that's soy-based, there will be hiccups to the supply chain. And so there's going to be an increased reliance on these types of skills, which, you know, will get us by, as they always have. But it's just really difficult because our society today isn't set up quite the same way it was 100 years ago, where this type of work was more reliable. So craft work has always been marginalized, and it's going to get much worse in the foreseeable future. And I sort of say that with a little asterisk, because I know that there's the caveat of, well, craft work, it wasn't marginalized, because how would you get your clothing? But at the same time, it wasn't considered skilled work so much. It wasn't like affluent. So, and of course that view changes depending on the time in history or prehistory. But at the end of the day, if you need to reduce your budget for buying clothing, and this is going to be really important for parents with growing kids. You gotta sort of change your views of, you know, the cost of clothing and repairing clothing and hand washing things to improve their lifespan, because machine washing can be more destructive for certain types of garments than hand washing. So same thing applies to using a dryer for drying your clothes. So I've just finished this side. I took this off, gave it a good scrub so that it's all clean, and I put it back, and I got to do the other side. The impact of a dryer on clothing is actually much more severe, and I didn't know how much of a difference it was until I started living abroad, and dryers just don't exist in most homes in South Korea, so I had to get used to drying everything on a rack, and was confronted first with the problem of how do you get clothes to dry in the summer when it's extremely humid? Yeah. And then here in the UK, it's not quite as bad because I usually hang things on radiators, and the radiators usually get operated much of the year because it's cooler here. But in terms of clothing longevity, drying your clothes naturally saves them for longer than drying them in a dryer. So I know that there's the whole expediency element. You can wash and dry your bed sheets really quickly, but the cost is you're going to be losing threads at a more rapid rate with the dryer than you would if you just did the air dry method. So it does cause you to do more planning, of course, but yeah, this is a little bit rambly, but I think you kind of get my point that all the things that we've learned how to do, how to make yarn, how to fix things, how to customize something for a body. Like, I just saw a tweet, I don't even remember who it was by, but she was like, you know, I wore this sweater, I just finished knitting and didn't like the way that it fit, so I decided to undo it and reknit the way I wanted it to look. And she said, yeah, I was pretty sure it's a she. She said, "Isn't knitting amazing?" And it is. For that kind of customization, you can't even do that with sewing. So long as you have some yarn, you can pretty much just make whatever. And you don't even have to have a really sophisticated knowledge or like stitch technique repertoire. You just need to know some basic increases and decreases and where to put them, how often to place them per rows in order to make something that fits your body, whatever shape it might be, in a way that you find to be comfortable. So yeah, I guess that also applies to crochet too. But yeah, I thought that was kind of a nice sentiment. You only do spinning once a year, Maureen? Yeah, this pretty much needed a deep cleaning just because, like I was saying, there's a lot of, I think, lanolin and oil accumulation and then dust sticking to it, so it was pretty necessary. But I think if you are project driven, it might be a good idea to do your project. So you do all your spinning, and then when you have all your yarn done, and before you set your wheel away for a couple of months while you do your knitting or weaving or whatever with the yarn, take that opportunity to just wipe everything down, oil everything, particularly like the leather areas. So this wheel has some leather down by the footman, but also the maiden right here, that's leather. So I would recommend just making sure all that stays nice and supple through the oiling. And then probably you just pick some random date, something that sticks out in your mind, like everyone knows tax day. You could just make it your tax day spring cleaning, where you dismantle your entire wheel, clean it, oil it, put it back together, right? Or you can have it be New Year's, or one of your kids' birthdays, right? I don't know. Just, if there's a date that sticks out in your head and it will help you remember, I'm always going to do it on this date, then even if you don't actually do it on that specific day, you're more than likely to remember, ooh, I should do this. And then if it falls on like a Wednesday and you have to work all day, you could say, well, I'm going to do it this Saturday. That's my task for that Saturday. So this is now all nice and clean. This crank is a little bit tarnished, but also to remember that this wheel is 10 years old. I bought it with one of my earliest paychecks when I was living in South Korea. And, oh no. There's a few nicks on my wheel, I've just noticed. So there's that one there. I'm pretty sure that's not been there because it looks pretty fresh. Dang it. Oh well. And then there's, it looks like it was sheared off just ever so slightly there. Probably, I might have bumped into it and, it got a little nick. There's some other little bangs, little indentations along the edge here. And it's probably because of where I have to store my wheel when I'm not using it. But that's okay, because for it being 10 years old, it's still in a pretty good condition. And I think I probably bought it in August of 2012, and it was delivered to me early in September. And then I actually launched my first tutorial, which was basically breaking in this wheel, I think the earlier part of October of 2012, I think. You have a few wheels. I actually have an Ashford Traditional, and back when I was trying to get some money for my visa, which I've gotten now, by the way, for those of you who wondered, the visa's all squared away, but I wanted to sell it so I could raise the money for it, for my visa, and I ended up not being able to sell it. I had a buyer, but you know how things go. So unfortunately, I have this other wheel that I don't know what to do with because I don't use it as often. I really prefer this wheel. And what I would like to do is get the bulky wheel attachment flyer for it, because I love making art yarns, but it's really difficult with a smaller orifice like this one has. And I also like the customization that I get with this one, because this comes off and you can put on a distaff. I'm going to call it a distaff. I've always called it a distaff, but I'm going to change. Yeah, it's a distaff. So I'm going to look into options for that. I'm going to try and get my Ashford Traditional sold. And it's not because I hate the wheel, it's just, I think it's actually better than the Babe wheel that I initially started off with. I just don't think we speak well to each other, and that's totally fine. I did not know I would have this opinion when I first bought it, and I bought it secondhand. But now that I've had a chance to use it, and I've used a bulky flyer attachment for that as well, it's just not for me. And I would rather give it or sell it to somebody who would benefit more from it, because right now it's just sitting in this room and I keep moving it around all the time. Okay, so what I've done is I've washed one of the footmen. It's still attached to the treadle. So you can see that it's still attached, right? But that part of it is now washed. And I'm going to do the other one. See about some other questions here. Yeah, it's a consistent issue with getting value for the work that we do, because we know what the value is, but a lot of people don't. So Chris sent me this really lovely video. If you happen to have it on hand and can post it in the chat, that'd be really great. But it was a really funny video about a woman who was hand weaving something, and the song was "Everything Takes a Really Long Time," and that's why it costs what it does. I'm not doing it justice. It's really, really good thing to watch, and maybe a little bit passive aggressive, but I think we kind of need to be sometimes, because the value of our work and our expertise needs to be brought up to speed with the rest of the world, because to sit down and do what we do as a beginner is not hard, but to consistently do something for big projects where you know before you sit down at a wheel that you can produce it exactly the way you want, takes a lot of time and practice. Oh yes, thank you for posting that in the comments. That'd be great. And I'll give you a perfect case in point of this. So on my Patreon, which I'm hoping to be able to post to weekly, just some behind the scenes things, baby ideas. I'll be looking for more input as these prospects kind of solidify a bit more. So if you want to be sort of like in the groundworks of what I'm doing on that, and that'd be fantastic. And so go check out my Patreon. But for example, I am trying to knit this sweater. I mean, I'm succeeding so far, and I know it looks small right now, but I've already tried it on, it does fit. But you may recognize the yarn from my Fiber Talk episode on spinning Columbia wool. And it's really beautiful, and I really love this like subtle striping effect, which maybe this camera can pick up on. Maybe you'll let me know in the comments if you can see this. But I didn't actually have enough yardage for a full sweater, and I kept oscillating between like, I don't want another scarf, or I don't want another shawl, because I have enough of those right now. What I really need are quality sweaters that fit me and look nice, because it's cold in the UK 9 months out of the year. So I put my math skills to work and figured out that actually I had enough yardage of the Columbia and enough yardage of this failed weaving project from like 2013 that I did together in order to make a sweater. And if you've been listening to my live streams for the last 2 months, you'll know that I've been working on making hand spun for a sweater. So why am I also knitting this sweater? Partially because I have, I think I have a serious case of imposter syndrome, and I always doubt my abilities, and sometimes I just need to prove to myself that I can do something. Even if someone said, oh yeah, you're totally capable, I don't always believe them. And so I wanted to prove to myself that I could knit a sweater that actually looked flattering, but importantly used hand spun. And in order to get to this stage, it took me several years of spinning in order to spin large quantities consistently for a big project like this where gauge would matter. So because I'm relying on gauge to design this pattern, the yarn that I'm using has to be extremely consistent. If I just followed someone else's pattern and used whatever guidelines they had set out for me, it wouldn't be as difficult to accommodate slight differences in gauge. But yeah, so this was kind of like a doubled thing where I needed to prove to myself, but also the value that we have as crafters to be able to do something like this the first time around. So hopefully that makes sense. And convincing the rest of the world that we have this value is really difficult because there's a tendency to be an average buyer looking at yarn here in the UK especially and think, why on earth would I spend £20 for a skein of this yarn when I can buy this other here for $3? So I've been looking at doing shows and checking out what other vendors have as selection, just to kind of see a little bit what the competition is like, but also to see what British buyers are interested in, like an anticipation of expectations. And I was a little bit surprised at just the number of wool shops that would go to these events, and they're often selling acrylic yarn for about £3 per 100 gram ball. And it's a little hard to see that, because then I have to go through a whole bunch of educating people why real wool helps the environment, why it's better than acrylic for the host of reasons that it is. And it's very exhausting, and it never means that they're going to buy something from me. So it's just, I'm educating people for the future, which is important, and something that I always do on, but it doesn't necessarily help in terms of sales. Oh, thank you. Oh. Do you want to say hi? Do you want to see him?
Who?
I'll live in barista.
I go to work as well. Hi.
Oh, there he is. Oh. Oh, it's nice getting coffee delivered to you. Which one was it?
I mixed 2 coffees.
Ooh, it's a Frankenstein coffee.
Yeah.
Really? Okay, thanks. Let's see here. Yes, I'm very excited about these prospects. I'm having a meeting on Tuesday next week to, I guess, hammer out some of the planning details to see if it's a viable option. And then if it is, I'm hoping that I'll be able to spring into action and actually get underway for doing shows later this year. So now I have the drive wheel off. I can actually clean out these grooves where the pins, these pins sit into this spot. So this is gonna be a little bit awkward. Sorry. Yeah. Last live stream I was talking a little bit about the cost of shipping, because from my view, I always want to know what the shipping costs so that I can separate it from the cost of the goods. In part because I just want to know the value being placed on the goods, not, including shipping. And I actually explained this recently in a comment on Instagram, because Etsy is not equal in terms of its treatment of sellers. So if you are in the US selling primarily to US buyers, your costs are much lower. But if you live in the UK and sell to a US market, there's a lot more of those optional bits that sort of are kind of necessary to have, and you also get charged more. So if a US order qualifies for free shipping at $35, and in order to buy enough to get that, it's usually about 3 to 4 bats. That means when I ship it to somebody, it's about £15 and 18 pence to ship it, which means that's about $20 in shipping. And if it's a $35 purchase and $20 is being spent on shipping alone, then I have to price everything so exorbitantly high in order to recoup anything. And because I don't want to make my wool so expensive that I can't reasonably function as a shop, then I end up taking it out of my earnings. And that doesn't include Etsy fees, because I get charged a VAT even though I don't qualify for a VAT, especially since before I was on a visa for students, student visa. So it created a lot of problems, and it made it more difficult for a UK seller to be seen and reach audience and still maintain survival. So yeah, like I said, part of the reason why I prefer my website is because I have more control over the fee structure that I charge, but it also makes it easier for a buyer to see what actually it is that they're getting. And I need to make a coupon for purchases over a certain amount so that there are discounts on shipping, even though you're never going to spend more on shipping than the actual cost of shipping. And I don't think that's usually the biggest issue for me, but it is for some people. So if you spend a bulk amount in my shop, then I will give discounts on things like shipping, just to compensate for the expense of buying in bulk. Because I am very similarly minded. I do the same thing whenever I'm going to do a bulk purchase for raw materials. So, yeah. Other questions? Yeah, my Ashford, I don't think was ever properly finished, and so it it absorbs oil like no one's business, and it is really difficult to maintain it, even though I've used this on it. I'm sorry, my cat, she's alone. Poor thing. Oh, yeah, you said that you bought the jumbo flyer on accident, but it was a happy one. That's always nice. Yes, I'm very excited about the visa option because it allows me not only to stay, but it removes a lot of restrictions for work. And even though I had hoped it would do more to get me into positions at work, there's still other issues. So, for example, I had an interview for a city council position, and the interview went well. They seemed to really enjoy me and my answers, and I was extremely well. I knew going into it I was very well qualified for the position. But when they called me back, they said, well, first off, it was lovely talking with you and hearing about your experiences and blah, blah, blah. But unfortunately, despite being really well qualified for this position, we're not going to go ahead with you as a candidate. and they explained why, and it was really frustrating because they were very minor details, and I gave, in some cases, very diplomatic answers. So, for example, whenever you do teamwork, the question is, how do you deal with teams? And because I've done a lot of teamwork stuff with being a PhD student, sometimes it's meant that I end up doing a lot of the work. And I know this sort of has like an ebb and flow where there are other times when people would wish I did more work to contribute, but my schedule just doesn't coincide. And so I do as much as I can, right? And so even if in the end one person might be doing more of the work than the others of that team, it's not necessarily a good answer to say, well, these people were part of the team, but they didn't do anything, so I had to do everything. And even if you frame that in a better way, it's still kind of, it comes off a little bit catty, I guess. And so I gave a very diplomatic answer to that question, where apparently that's not the answer they wanted to hear. They wanted to hear how I have managed work for other people without necessarily it being totally equal. And then I was just really frustrated hearing them say, you're very well qualified, but we're not going to hire you for this position. What? I laugh now, but I was not laughing at the end of that phone call. Okay, good. You did see the stripes on my sweater. Fantastic. Yeah, it's really difficult to make wages on handcrafts. But part of the reason why I think it's important that we still do it is because you might actually get someone who is familiar with purchasing from crafters, and they are very willing to spend whatever price you put on it. So for example, when I was up in Scotland back in 2019, I saw a hand-knitted collarwork cardigan. It was 119 pounds, which is probably about $140. And I bought it. I didn't argue. I was just like, ooh, I love this. I'm buying it. And, you know, there's got to be other people out there like me. That was also back when I had much more of a disposable income. But, you know, it's difficult. Yeah. Selling a handmade quilt to people, I can appreciate would be very difficult because I had a tiny little bit of history with quilting, and it's really hard, and I am not precise enough for it. There's got to be some kind of knack that I don't know, but wow. Yeah, he's really, really good at making coffee. Not the only reason I keep him around. I think he's cute. But he's got a particular knack for flavor. So having worked in a chocolate shop where you have workshops where we discuss flavors, he has this ability to recall a flavor from a coffee from 5 years ago and just remembers it. So you know, if you've ever had a cup of coffee and you're like, not my thing, but put some milk and sugar in it or some flavorings to kind of make it taste better or taste the way that I like, he can do that with coffee just by tweaking this one element, and he knows exactly how it's going to turn out based on that. Sometimes you got to do some fine tuning, but he's really, really good at guessing exactly how to brew a coffee that he's never brewed before, and the best preparation for it. So whether that's going to be like a filter, like what this is a hand poured filter, or as an espresso, or as French press, or as an AeroPress, or any other type of making coffee. So I'm finishing the base here, and there's still this really stubborn bit, but I need to make sure that I don't get the platform too wet, even though it's already been stained and sealed by the manufacturer. I don't want to overdo things. Oh my gosh, you've got me set up on VR. I can't imagine how weird and discombobulating that must be. Oh wow, it's like I'm really there. Oh, Chris, Art Yarn is so wonderful. If you don't already, I would check out Jazz Turtle Creations. She's on Instagram, but she has so many really great ideas, and she's got a lot of tutorial and a lot of experience doing this. She makes it look effortless, but I think it's a little bit deceptive because sometimes once you've learned the technique, it is effortless. It looks complicated, but that's because you're working with a wide variety of materials, like whatever inspires you, it just comes together simply through the process of spinning. But she is a constant source of inspiration for me, and even though I don't make the kinds of art yarns that she does, because again, I don't have the bulky flyer attachment for my wheel, I'm still sort of limited on what will fit through the orifice. So this here, right? I think it's a 1 centimeter opening, thereabouts, or like 3/4 of an inch. But usually a bulky flyer can be about 1.25 inches or up to 2 inches. And that allows those thicker yarns to kind of go through there. And then because the bobbins are bigger, everything about this flyer apparatus is bigger to accommodate it. So this would be wider. And so the bobbins, as a result, are bigger. And you can pack more of that yarn on there. So you don't have a skein that's like 15 yards. You can have one that's 40 yards. And so, yeah, as much as I want to do it with this wheel, I just don't have the right attachment for it. But if you'll remember back when I was doing my supported spindle videos, one of the things that I said is you can spin a soft single and then overply that single on itself to make a really fluffy, soft, rounded 2-ply. And she said, oh, this would be amazing cabled. And I was like, I never thought about doing that. So cabling yarn is a really great way to build up diameter, color, texture. You can even use that method to build up energy into your yarn. So if you wanted to do some springy knits that have some elasticity, then you could use those techniques to create it, essentially. So just because it says art yarn doesn't mean that it has to be like art in the sense of a masterpiece. It's more art in a sense of non-utilitarian. So I would consider this Columbia yarn, I would consider it more utilitarian. But because this white has some silver in there, you might get away with calling it an art yarn. But an art yarn can be lots of things, where I would say if it's an inconsistent gauge, so like any kind of thin and thick yarn, whether it's a single or plied, anything that has like uncarded bits of wool kind of sticking out on the edges, that would be one. Anything that's got like lots of differences in staple length. So if you work with sari silk blended bats, which I like to do, you will get some short bits and some longer bits, and they just kind of form how they form. And a lot of the yarns that I end up making have that art yarn quality. There's just there's much more variety in terms of art yarn than there are traditional yarns, or what I would call a utilitarian yarn. So art yarn is a really big category, so don't be too afraid. Yeah, well, it was a city council job, Chris. Not only did they say this, but they said, maybe next time you should say something like, oh, I've always wanted to work this job, or this kind of job, or for this location. And I'm like, who grows up thinking I want to work for a city council? Like, I have real difficulties with lying. There's only a couple of times when I can get away with it, and it's usually for things like Christmas and birthdays. Just because, I want to keep the suspense. And so I have a really standard response whenever like my partner asks me what I've gotten him. I'll either just smile and be like, yes, that's exactly what I got you. Or I just say, nope, for everything. Even if you manage to guess it, I'll just be like, nope. Is that a bottle of whiskey? Nope. It is. So that was another thing I couldn't believe, being told, hey, maybe you should lie and say things you don't mean. Because actually, at the end of the day, the person who took that job probably wanted the money. And they may have done the job just fine. It wasn't particularly hard. But what was really interesting is I would have been liaising with local archaeologists and environmental specialists, which I not only have done for previous jobs, but I have a degree in archaeology. Several. I don't know why I wouldn't be more perfect for that position, because I know exactly how to communicate with those groups of people. So, I definitely did dodge something, I guess, with that. But it's still frustrating to hear, after years of experience doing loads of different things, that you're still not qualified for kind of like an entry-level position. Oh dear. Wow, really? Kromski has a larger size than just the bulky? Wow. Who knew? I didn't know that. So this has unfortunately been taking a really long time to clean. So I have an option. I could either just finish doing this and talk about what I did in the next session. I mean, I could leave it taken apart, but then that means I can't make any yarn for the next week. So what should we do here? But I will show you. You see how clean that is now? All that dirt and grime is now gone. You can actually see the Kromski label here in the front again. Yeah, I probably would have been doing most of the grunt work. In fact, that was one of the things they teased during the interview, which was um, we have this person who's really good at their job, but not so great at the admin stuff. So we'd probably need someone to do the admin for that person because we'd rather them be out doing their job. And I'm like, okay. I don't know what that is, because like, I mean, I would never expect someone to do my duties if that was my job. Does that make sense? Like, if it was your job to do admin and then you never did it, then someone has to be hired in to do your admin work for you. That's a huge power play. Like, there's so many things to unpack with that, but I was just, when I was listening to that, I was like, I mean, I'm used to doing stuff like admin work, not necessarily used to doing it on behalf of somebody else who just doesn't do it because they don't care to do it for their job, even though it's part of their job. But, you know, I'm willing to do the work just so that I can get the experience and the funds to continue doing the things that I enjoy doing. Um, yeah, so, oh dear. um, yeah, so the name of the art yarn spinner, she's under Jazz Turtle Creations, and her name is Esther Rogers. I think she also does massage therapy to help with like paying bills and things like that. So she's got like a little studio thing set up in her house. But aside from that, I'm sure there are others out there, but I feel like she's the one who kind of does it for me. Maybe it was because she was one of the first art yarn spinners that I encountered who is very generous with teaching people who just want to learn. I know that at the end of the day, we all have to kind of get paid for the work that we do, and that includes education. But she put enough free stuff out there that allowed me as a beginner to really understand what I was reading in books, which I did buy. I had to leave all that stuff in Korea, just couldn't get it all sent in various packages and things like that. So I don't have any of my spinning books anymore. But yeah, she's probably my favorite in terms of art yarn creators. And she's been doing it for a really long time too. Yeah, I have a very similar work ethic where if I am asked to do a job, I'll get it done. And maybe it's not always like my best work because sometimes time pressures get in the way, but at least it's done. Other times it's sort of like I can't do a worse job in order to meet the deadline, so it must mean that the deadline wasn't reasonable, and so it's not done yet, right? But I've never been in a position where I just like, not doing it. And it's just absurd to listen to. I don't know. Yeah, I imagine that if I did this admin for this one individual who didn't want to do it, it wouldn't stop with that person. That, you know, it would probably exploit my desire to do a good job, and so I would do a really good job for everything assigned to me, and I would end up in a situation where I was constantly overworked. And it could also be that they were struggling to find somebody as a result of the situation. So maybe you'll see a job post for that city council position again. Oh man. probably is a red flag, and I'm not too upset about not getting that particular position. I'm more upset at hearing someone very casually saying, "You're really well qualified, but not qualified enough to do this job." One of the things about higher education that often gets overlooked, and this applies to anyone who has gotten an associate's degree or a bachelor's or even beyond with postgraduate degrees, does not have to just be a PhD. You learn how to do stuff more effectively because you're kind of asked to do so. And so anyone who has any education beyond high school often develops that skill. And people who are in vocational occupations, people who work on cars and do nursing and those types of positions, where you might not need a degree, but you might need a certificate, and it's more practical work rather than classroom taught stuff. They're also really good at figuring out the best way to do something because they're working in a practical environment. So even if a theoretical sense, oh, it should be like this, but in reality it's not, they have that skill, right? So, we just, unfortunately, it's not thought of in all the exact same ways that I feel like it should be, but dang. I'm sure a lot of us have that same kind of story where we try to get a job and then we're told basically the same kind of thing, like, we like you, but, or you're really good for this position, but, ugh. If I don't have to hear those words again, I'll be great. Yeah. Oh, I live in Leicester, so I think there's about 500,000 people who live here. I think it's like one of the 6th largest cities in the UK outside of London. And yeah, you're absolutely right, Misty. They probably had in mind a particular kind of candidate they wanted, someone who would kind of listen and do to a particular point, but also were exceedingly replaceable. So if it turned out to be a rolling position where they had difficulty keeping somebody there for months or for years rather than months, then in the end it wouldn't really matter. So yeah, again, in that regard, it's not me being upset about not getting that job, because it wasn't my dream job. It just wasn't. I just thought that I could do the job really, really well. But I probably would have made changes that improved efficiency. I probably would have reorganized things that made more sense. And that would have probably caused issues from their point of view. And I wouldn't just do as I was told. I probably would have friction in that regard. And the reason why I say that is because this has happened to me in the past. When I was teaching in Korea, and part of the reason why I lamented that position, because I enjoyed teaching these 7 to 9-year-olds English, but I did it too well. And I didn't understand at the time why I was taken away from teaching children and sent away to sort of like a background position where I was going to be writing educational content for people to teach. And it was probably because I was costing the business money. The way that these English prep schools tend to work is education as a business. So I was really proud of the fact that my students, who were sort of like the lowest class, those all over the place in terms of their competency of English. They probably wanted to get me out of that position because I was able to promote 40% of my students to the next difficulty level, whereas most of the time it was about 20%. And that actually has more to do with how Korean parents would view the progress of their children. They wouldn't see it as their children actually doing better, but the school or the teaching doing worse, that the quality of the teaching was degrading to the point where anybody could just pass. And that's actually not it at all. Those kids legitimately did better. And so they compensated for my ability to teach by taking me away from those kids. And it took me a while to kind of reconcile this, but if you're running an educational business, then it doesn't look good if your pass rate is so high between levels, because it makes it seem like those students aren't going to be really well prepared for entrance exams for universities. So it's kind of complicated, but I didn't understand that at first. I'm like, why would they take me from this position? I just didn't understand. But it's the whole doing my work too well. Mm. Mm. Are you in the UK too, Misty? Let's see here. Was there anything else I wanted to mention? Oh, yeah, it was completely for them to be able to maintain their reputation, because it's a fairly large ESL school that I taught for, which it was outside of their normal education, so they went to school, you know, Monday through Friday from like 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., but then they would go to sort of like a prep school afterwards. And most students will go to a prep school that includes things like learning English. But as you get older, so right around 10 or 11, you'll add to that list. So you'll do like math, science, all of the like the big names in education, so that you can get an edge out on your colleagues, because they're your direct competitors for those placements. So by the time you are in high school, so between the ages of 14 and 18, you're going to school full time in the morning and also in the evenings every day. So you'll get between usually 12 to 18 hours of extra schooling per day. I mean, schooling in general. 12 to 18 hours of total schooling each day. And that doesn't include doing things like homework. Yeah. I don't know. It was really upsetting for me to be taken away from students, because I felt like I was really communicating with them. Because I was one of the few English teachers who used Korean to help them understand sounds. Because obviously growing up speaking Korean, they knew what those sounds were like and how to form them in their mouths. But one of the issues is they don't want you to use Korean to teach them stuff, that it has to be all in English. I'm like, if you don't lay the infrastructure for them to understand how the mouth works, then their way of enunciating is never going to improve. So, you know, it was little things like that to implement, just so that, you know, the youngest I taught were 9-year-olds, and the oldest was 11. And so, you know, they're so young, and you could go to an ESL school, I think, pretty much starting around age 5 or 6 to learn English as a second language. So they go to school in addition to school. But you know, it's not for me to judge what parents encourage their kids to do, but it was really interesting and kind of eye-opening for me. Yeah, 80% being held back is considered a success because it means that the prep school is giving them the necessary rigor to really accentuate the top from the not top, and then it encourages parents to spend more money on getting them to the next level. So maybe they'll book extra lessons, or maybe they will perceive that the school must be doing something right because they're pulling out only the top percentages. And so you keep pushing your kids, like, you need to be in that top 20%. And so it creates unnecessary amounts of pressure on kids. But it's the only logical reason I've ever been able to come up with for why you would remove a teacher that is increasing the pass rate for English. I mean, if someone else can come up with a better reason why that might be the case, I'm all ears. Because I actually don't know for sure. I just have an inkling. So yeah, gosh, these things are so dirty. They've been just sitting in this soapy water and they're still covered. Yeah, so, I mean, without really getting into too much detail, it was very common to beg for grades in school. So, having been exposed to university students, they would sometimes bribe their professors with gifts for grades. Oh, teacher, I can't get a B in this class. Can you please give me an A? And it's like, you got the grade that you got because that's what you managed to achieve in this semester, right? And to me, that doesn't prepare them for anything in reality, right? You're not always going to be accommodated like that. Also, if you beg for an A but didn't actually earn the A, how is this going to warp your perspective of getting things in life? And how does this relate to other individuals from different university systems who have put in the work to get those A's? There will be a huge disparity in how they deal with a variety of situations in the same position, right? So there's that, plus it undervalues the other people's work who have legitimately gotten the A, not just bribed for one. But it's so amazingly widespread in Korea. Well, I mean, as of the last time I was there in 2015. It's not good for things like that to happen because everybody suffers from it. But it still doesn't change the fact that a lot of university students will beg their teachers and bribe their teachers with gifts for grades. Unreal, right? But this is, you know, some of the stuff I was exposed to going there and living amongst it all, and made me realize that I didn't want to be here. This was not the education that I thought it was. And there are a lot of issues with the try again and again and again without really learning. You just memorize and perform. and a lot of artistic abilities were denied to some kids. So I remember one Korean teacher telling me, make sure that this student doesn't do any doodling in class. And I was like, sometimes doodling helps you focus more. And she was just like, no, there can't be any doodling by this person. And I was like, it's just so strange to hear. I don't know. So yeah, like I said, I didn't want to get too much into it, but that's one of the reasons why I wasn't too sad to leave Korea, because being a very smart and opinionated foreign female, I was in the worst category and I would not have any job prospects if had I continued to stay there. So yeah, very counterintuitive indeed. um, yeah, I mean, having been an educator for a really long time because of my experience being in education, um, it was really difficult for me to get my head around the whole idea, and having a background in science, this whole idea of when you are testing an experiment and you get a result, you don't then keep doing the experiment so many times and getting the same result before you conclude that these things relate. So if I don't change any variables for the experiment, and this is the answer I keep getting from this experiment, it's insane to think that suddenly it's going to be different. And it's that kind of rationale that doesn't make any sense. It's expending energy just to expend it. And so, whereas I think Korean students are very good at memorization, they're not necessarily good at learning and adapting, or like spatially conceptualizing the things around them, because that's a very creative way of examining problems and evaluating them. And if you're never encouraging that, it's going to be difficult for them to solve certain types of problems, right? There's no flexibility. And in the business world, whenever you have to work with a company that has different groups of individuals with different education styles from different countries around the world, this actually becomes extremely problematic. And so, how do you deal with those people? A lot of it comes down to understanding a society's culture and the types of problems that they are best suited to solve. And so, it has nothing to do with the intelligence of that individual, because they're probably very, very smart. But it's how to unlock that particular brilliance for a large scale problem that requires this kind of insider understanding of the way people learn information about the world. So, whereas I don't believe this is the best and most effective way to learn something, just kind of going through it until you know it. It does have certain advantages, but I think because humans are very creative, it also means that you need a creative outlet. And so if you're not pairing them together, something's going to give. And so, I saw a lot of high school aged students in the English prep schools. They were very depressed and very tired all the time. And it's really no wonder why. It's because their brains were put through this exhaustive cycle of trying to just do something again and again until they finally get it, without being able to just be creative and do creative things. So, yeah. Oh dear. I do speak a little bit Korean, but it's really, really bad, because after my first year, I ended up not going out as much because I was really upset and depressed being there. So I can say things like hello, 안녕하세요, or goodbye. I don't remember now. 안녕히 계세요 or 안녕히 가세요, depending on whether you are leaving or you're saying goodbye to someone who's leaving. Thank you is 감사합니다. I can count 하나, 둘, 셋, 1, 2, 3. I don't even think I could order anything in Korean. I can still read it, but I don't necessarily know what I'm saying. What's funny too is I still train a Korean martial art, which I've just restarted doing recently, but that also uses Korean. Oh, there's a Korean grandmother and daughter eating foreign foods on YouTube. No, I haven't. There's actually a Japanese show which all features a restaurant. Now I'm trying to think what it was called, but it was on Netflix for a while. Yeah, there are lots of different skills out there. Not one way of learning is the best. It's more just balance. I feel like you need to have balance of skills, and this Korean way of just like hammering these factoids into kids' heads just doesn't necessarily produce the best result. And they'd probably be less exhausted if they had appropriate breaks and a better way of organizing information to accommodate different learning styles. Yeah, so it was probably one of my more eye-opening experiences in my life, but it also, fortunately, it didn't remove my desire to live abroad. So I really do like living outside of the US, with difficulties, of course, but they're not unmanageable. They're just things that you have to think about and plan for. Let's see here. Okay, so I think I've pretty much cleaned everything now. So this is clean. I finished doing my treadles, so those are all nice and clean. I might just do the oiling and the polishing and reassembly later, but this is what I would consider a deep cleaning for your wheel. Any kind of articulation points when you're reassembling your wheel need to be oiled. Oh my goodness, I'm gonna lose this little washer. So when I finish oiling this and sealing it, so I've got my oil, my sweet almond oil, and I polish it with my beeswax. When I put this back together, even if I'm not going to spin right away, just oil it. So I'm going to oil all the articulation points, so that means this bit here, where this copper tubing goes on. Copper? Brass? I don't know what this is. It's probably brass. It's probably brass. And the same thing on this side. This is the back side of the wheel where the footmen attach. So this will get oiled. This will get oiled. This will get oiled. And then when I put it back in its cradle on the body of the wheel, and I put the footman back on, then I will oil my flyer and the bobbin that goes on there, and I'll also oil the points of leather. So there's 3 areas where there's leather on the Kromski wheel. Down here there's the footman. Whoops. Sorry about that. Yeah, so this bit of leather here, where the footmen are. I'll oil that and all of this. So this is actually still really supple, despite the fact that it's 10 years old and I've never replaced it. And then on the front of the wheel, I have to be careful maneuvering it at this point. Gosh, now I can't remember what this is called. This screw at the top kind of raises and lowers this piece here, and that's where the flyer sits in. So because this is leather, I like to make sure that it's really well oiled, and because this here is also made out of leather, I always want to make sure that's really well oiled. So I usually put the oil here and then I just give it a little rotate. When I first got this piece, it said to just saturate it with oil before you even think about spinning. And again, I've had this for 10 years and it's even been in storage and it's totally fine. I think it used to be a light brown, but now it looks almost black just because it's so heavily oiled. But that would be sort of like, once I put it back together, how I would keep it, even if I wasn't going to use it right away, or even if it was going to be a month before I used it again. And then in terms of checking up on it, I probably will just do as I always do. Whenever I sit down to spin, I always oil my articulation points, so that would be at the orifice here, and then here where the drive wheel is. I always oil that. It improves the spin. And so I think for next week, doing a live stream, I'm going to do some more spinning and talk a little bit about my experience with these prospects this week. I don't know if I'll be able to get enough details about this to say much, but if I do get some permission, I might post it to Patreon first, just to kind of keep things a little bit restricted. In case it doesn't work out, then certain details may not be public, if that makes sense. But otherwise, I will be hopefully moving forward with some kind of plan that allows me to continue doing this more full-time, which is what I would prefer to do. Another thing I want to do for next week is actually reconfigure my space here. So I bought some new totes today based on some donations that I got last month. So that should hopefully double my efficiency in terms of production. So I'll be able to make more bats. So if you have any ideas about colors, or if you're interested in anything, you can always email me and I can definitely do something custom for you. But hopefully this will be heralding an expansion, and then I'll be able to do more with things like shows. That's sort of the biggest hurdle, is getting enough inventory in bulk in order to go to a show to have things available. So yeah, hopefully I'll be able to talk more about that next time, and maybe I'll do like a little studio tour. It won't take long. It'll take about 2 minutes, but I will see how much I can get accomplished with that. And I tried really hard to get some spindles into the shop today before the live stream, but there are still 2 in there, and I think I have 6 more left to post, so I will work on getting that, and then getting a Fiber Talk episode up. So this one will be about Targi, which I know that a lot of American spinners like to use it. This was my first time using it, and if you are interested in Targi, I'm considering asking my mom to bring it back to me when she visits in the summer for my graduation. So that would be great. Can avoid some importing issues like shipping because my mom's visiting. So, as always, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in a week's time or maybe a little sooner. I will be posting as often as I can, and yeah, if you ever get any ideas about future videos or topics for these live streams, so if there's anything you want me to do so that you can see in person, let me know, and I'll see what I can do about arranging it. But yeah, so I hope you guys had a really great Sunday, and hopefully the weather is better for you than it was for me today. But I will see you soon. Thanks for watching, you guys. Bye!